making time. The first week back in uni, I know it's packed for everyone, so we appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and hear from our exciting panel of speakers from a bunch of different companies on some cool roles in tech outside of development, because I'm sure some of us in the room are a bit tired of coding. So I think first off, we'll just pass it over to our team, the team at Xero, to start off the panel. And you see on this board there, we've got the agenda for tonight. So following Serato will be second, like the teacher, where we have Julian Lambert, director, and Son from Xero. And then Tristan Beesworth from EY. And we'll wrap up at around 8, just for some quick hearing and some networking. We can talk to the judge yourself, otherwise feel free to jump in with questions once they're done speaking on the slot. So without any further ado, I'll pass it over. Thanks so much.
Is it everyone's together as well? Okay, cool. Okay, so sweet. Thank you everyone for coming along. My name is Elliot. I look after security and IT at Analysts. I was a software engineering student here as well, graduated more years ago than I would like to admit. And yeah, I kind of figured out how to migrate from being a software engineer into kind of more of a security role. I think that being a software engineer is something that is incredibly transferable to other roles. And so I wanted to kind of provide a software engineering lens on the different opportunities and how your backgrounds and how kind of what you're studying and what you're doing kind of magnifies you and amplifies you in different roles. But first I wanted to talk a little bit about Analysts, because my guess is that basically no one here has heard of us before. We do a lot of kind of B2B work, so consumers, and you guys probably haven't heard of us, but we are a fintech company. We were founded about 6 years ago. Our headquarters are in Australia and in Hong Kong, so kind of split between Australia and China. We've got about 1,300 employees worldwide. 300 of those are software engineers. And our latest valuation was around $6 billion. If you came along to the recruiting events over the past 2 days, you've probably also seen this map here, which I have lovingly updated. These are where our offices are. I am the only New Zealand employee, so I have crossed it out and just put myself as the office. But to give a little bit of background about what Analysts is and what we're trying to do. So we're trying to build the best global financial infrastructure and scale the digital economy. And this is like the buzzwordy investor slides, like, hey, look at us, we're great, we're fantastic. So I think the best way to explain it is to kind of tell the story of where we've come from and where we're going. So we started 6 years ago, founded by a couple of friends in Melbourne. Being based in Melbourne, they did the Melbourne thing and they started a cafe, and they were trying to order coffee cups from China. And the way that they did that is they created a bank account in Australia and a bank account in China, and then they would pay their supplier in China, and then the supplier would send them coffee cups and then they could serve coffee. The problem is that FX fees, foreign exchange fees, are incredibly expensive, particularly when you're looking at doing things from Western to Eastern markets. And they're super unreliable. Swift is just an incredibly outdated system. The way it works is horrifying. The whole text file transfer thing is completely broken. And the fees on it are pretty insane. And if there are delays, that materially impacts your business. So if you're trying to serve coffee and you're trying to send money to China to get your coffee cups and there's delays there, you end up a coffee company that doesn't have any coffee cups, so you just can't do your product. They basically decided, this is ridiculous, we have an engineering background, let's try and figure out a way to fix this. So they started as an FX company, they started kind of getting licenses in a bunch of different places around the globe, so that they could offer cheaper, faster FX across a bunch of different countries and currencies. And as they were doing that, they kind of thought to themselves, different currencies are kind of dumb, which when you think about it is true. So what they started thinking is, what about if instead we create a global bank account? So as a business, you have this one bank account. You can pay your employees in a bunch of different places, you can pay your vendors, you can collect payments, and it all will just go into the same kind of slush fund almost, and you can just access it wherever you need to in the world. And this continued to scale. We started operating in more and more countries, and as we started building additional products like expense management, the ability to issue cards, additional controls on employee spend, all of these kind of things, we started to realize that the true thing that was really valuable about what we were building was not these individual products that our customers were using, but the fact that we could offer them at all. We had all of this back-end infrastructure that allowed us to build these products. And that back-end infrastructure was 6 years of hard work on legal, regulatory compliance requirements to be able to actually create stuff in the first place. And we thought, what if we could offer that to our customers so that they didn't have to go through 6 years of pain to be able to go and serve people around the world? And so what it kind of evolved into is global financial infrastructure and applications to empower businesses to operate anywhere and anytime. Again, pretty buzzwordy, but what this means is that you can build your own fintech company on top of Airwallet's. And we have companies that do this. So one of those companies is Stake. And Stake is a stock trading platform. There's seemingly hundreds of them now after attending the recruiting events today. But effectively, when you sign up to Stake, you kind of add some funds to your Stake account. And it's not actually a Stake account. It's an Airwallet's account that has Stake's logo on it. And when they need to issue cards to pay brokers or something like that, I don't actually know how it works. It's not a Stake card, even though it has the logo. It's an Airwallet card. And instead of having to go through months and years of pain to be able to actually stand up their business and start taking payments or taking funds from people and paying different brokers or whatever, you can do it in a couple of minutes. And so the way that we kind of operate now is not that we try to build better products than our competitors. We will always try and do that, but we try to provide a platform where people can go and compete with each other. It's to the point now where you have Wise, you have Stripe, you have these massive companies. If you want to build a competitor, you can do it on top of their wallets, and it will take you significantly less years just from a regulatory compliance perspective. So that's a little bit of the background. I'm going to spend a bit more time talking about kind of the roles that we're looking for and how a software engineer can amplify that. I have a security background as well, so I want to just kind of dive into that and pitch that. I think it's an incredibly fascinating domain, so hopefully I can get you guys excited, or you just ignore me, I'm okay with it. So first, being a software engineer doesn't limit you to being a software engineer. One thing that people kind of think about software engineering is that I do this and then I go and I write code for like 8 hours a day every day, and then I hate my life. Because now everyone loves that, surprisingly. Personally, I still try to write as much code as possible, but I know that these other areas are really interesting, and I want to apply my abilities to those domains rather than just kind of cranking out code. I think it's really important for us to realize that as software engineers, you're building up a set of talents of problem solving, of understanding systems, of being able to think about the bigger picture and break it down into technical components that can be implemented. That is an incredibly valuable skill set, no matter where you look. And so when we look at the kind of ignore who we are at the top, I did these slides definitely not an hour beforehand. But these are the kind of areas that I find software engineers are incredibly effective. So we have also product and management should be the same line. Product management is not a separate role. It's a little bit wanky with the boss. So product management is a really fascinating one. Product management requires you to be able to understand what your customers are doing, synthesize what they're actually trying to do, and build a better product to serve what they're trying to do. And what you need to be able to do for that is be able to listen to people, empathize with them, but also to be a little bit arrogant in building a product and be able to say, my customer says that they want to be able to upload receipts to our expense management platform as images, and you're kind of saying no, fuck that, that's wrong. What you actually want to do is apply some sort of cool OCR thing, and then from there be able to extract certain information, and we can start to automatically generate some of the expense reports and fill stuff out. That kind of deep knowledge of what someone's trying to do, coupled with that software engineering background of being able to think about the bigger picture and the technical elements that can go into a solution is really valuable. The second part of this, which product management people don't like to admit, is that if you're a product manager without a technical background, you'll sign people up to shit that's not possible. And if you have that software engineering background, you're able to say, cool, an infinitely scalable database is not a real thing. So that is also a beneficial one. Strategy and design are not my strong suit. However, I find that having that software engineering background again allows you to provide that technical lens on the company strategy, on how we sell our products, and it's just a useful skill to have to be able to kind of pitch tech companies in particular. Design based off these slides, I'm sure you can see it's not a strength of mine, but security is. And being a software engineer and moving to the security space is incredibly valuable. Security, we'll get into this in a second, and I'll pitch it a bit more, but it's an incredibly technical domain that doesn't actually require a lot of code. But when you can write code, you become kind of a force multiplier for the team. Instead of looking at problems and trying to figure out the fastest way to solve some sort of operational issue, or trying to figure out the best way to secure a solution, you start thinking, how can I automate this? How can I build like a product that will actually solve this issue and just get rid of it entirely? And so you basically figure out how can you do more with less people, which is a really, really powerful skill. And then finally on the IT side of the house, software engineers, including me until about a year ago, typically cash on IT. The way that it has evolved in the past, particularly 2 years, is really fascinating. It's a lot closer to your typical product and engineering teams. Like as an example, like Analysts, we hire software engineers into IT, we hire product managers. We build arguably better products than some of our product and engineering teams, which I'm proud of. But it's a lot more about being able to figure out how can you kind of be a force multiplier for the rest of your business? How can you treat your users, your employees, understand what they're trying to do and like solve their solve their problems with like really interesting products, and use that to kind of inspire what the rest of the company is doing. So an example of this is we recently built this idea of like a forced password reset within our platform. So, as like a kind of like admin ops person within the company, you might need to force someone to change their password, like a customer, right? And what we did instead is we just force reset people's passwords in the engineering team, and we're like, hey, this is what good looks like. What we're doing, the way that we've built this internally through our IT team, is that we check a bunch of different factors. We check, are you in the right location? Are you using the right laptop? Are you connected to our VPN? Or do you have some other auth session? Like, what are all of the ways that we can identify you without actually getting you to take any action? And so we can basically like build this cool password reset feature internally that seems like you're just setting a new password, but there's all this like cool technical complexity to make sure it's really secure. The thing that I found really cool is that our product engineering team that was working on this password reset feature saw that and then just went and basically copied it. And so IT is a really interesting area where you have the opportunity to inspire the rest of the company and set the bar for quality for everyone else. You basically define what is good and then you challenge them to do it. However, going to the security side of things, security I think is incredibly fascinating. It's something that I've been into for probably 5 or 6 years now. It's not all fine. The way I got into security is that I was working for a company called Palantir. We were working with a customer that was doing security stuff. I had no idea what they were doing. And I read this report called the ABT1 report by a company called Mandiant, and I thought it was the most fascinating thing in the world. And it was talking about how China attacks different companies in other countries around the world. I read that and it just changed my life. I was like, wow, this stuff actually happened. This is the coolest shit in the world. And so I started diving deep into it. I just started reading as many blog posts as possible, started going to conferences, just basically went as deep as I could, as quickly as possible to get as much information. And then we just constantly look for opportunities to apply that to what I was doing in my day-to-day job. So I started writing a little bit less code and going and chatting to customers more, and just literally sitting in their SOCs and kind of SOC as an SOC, not SOC, and understanding what they actually do each day and how they assess risks and how they actually respond to alerts and stuff like that. And then from there I was able to kind of build up a lot more experience in that realm, and I thought it was just a really cool space. So security at its core is basically about understanding your environment. This is your corporate environment, so your company you're defending as well as the products that they produce. Knowing where you're strong, where you're weak, and being really kind of introspective about it, knowing that you are going to get attacked and this is the most likely place, and then you kind of figure out how can I defend against that. And then the third is reducing risk, which is the most boring part of the slide, but the most important. And effectively all you're doing is you're just saying, look, as a company, we're going to get hacked. It's inevitable, right? And so what we want to do is just reduce the chance that it happens. Depending on where you work, some people will take this as a challenge to make your personal or your company's risk as minimal as possible. If you work in banking in Australia in particular, you just basically look at the other big 3 banks and you're like, cool, who's the slowest of those? Let's not be that guy. But I think it's the ability to assess the likelihood you get attacked and that they're successful is a really powerful skill. And ultimately security is just about keeping the bad people out and good people safe. So what I wanted to do is give a little bit of insight into what security actually looks like with a pretty fun topical topic, which is the Log4j vulnerability that came out December last year, I think. Has anyone not heard of this Log4j vulnerability? Cool, alright, so for the people that were comfortable admitting it, the Log4j vulnerability, also known as Log4Shell, is a zero-day vulnerability in Log4j, which is a really popular logging framework. It's incredibly simple to exploit. You basically just have to send a request that gets logged somewhere in the code base, and then it allows an attacker to control whatever the server was that executed that logging command. Couple of little things to, I guess, know. Zero-day means a vulnerability that was in a code base that gets discovered. So it's basically announced or discovered on the 0th day that it is uncovered. It's a stupid term, like it's just a new thing. And I wanted to talk through how it actually works and kind of talk about how we would detect and how to prevent that from being exploited, which is very typical of like work in a security team. So what happens is your attacker, who's on the left up here, sends a request to the victim. And this would be like a web server or website or whatever. And in that request, whether it's in some of the headers of like the request that they actually send with the web request, or if it's in the URL or anywhere else, they put this Jdi LDAP string. There's actually some slashes missing from this, it's not entirely accurate. But basically what this does is it causes what's called a Jdi Remote Lockup and load. So basically what it does is Java, for incredibly dumb reasons, attempts to load whatever the resources are that you send in this little URL or in this little parameter. It loads that into memory as like some Java class basically, and then it executes it for stupid reasons. It's actually really useful if you're trying to share configurations across services. You can have them like periodically check in and say, cool, here's some Jdi URL. Tell me what the latest configuration is that I need. It's really good for microservice architectures. However, when you arbitrarily remotely load and execute files, people find out ways to exploit that. So effectively, the attacker sends this command to your web server at the top. The web server then does this like Jdi Remote Lockup and load. So this goes through your attacker server at the bottom here. The attacker server returns that malicious class file and executes it, which results in what's known as a reverse shell. So, does anyone know what a reverse shell is? Excellent, cool. Okay, so reverse shell is how attackers control servers that they've managed to pop/own, both of which are legitimate industry terms. The security industry has this like weird fascination with coming up with stupid names for things. So you own a server and like it's like a oh no hacker thing, but it's like a real thing. And hearing a dude in his 50s talk about servers getting owned was the weirdest thing I experienced for the first time. I was like, wow, you're not in like sunglasses and a trench coat and like running around Walmart playing with laptops. So reverse shell is basically when you have you want to control a server remotely. So instead of you telling that server what to do, you reach out to it. It reaches out to you. So effectively, you can imagine your web server periodically like sends a web request to your laptop or to your attacker server and says, "Hey, what should I execute?" And that's all it is. It's just a way of like having that information come from the victim rather than come from the attacker. It's a really kind of fun way to be able to avoid firewalls because they typically don't limit outbound traffic. So your attacker then gets complete control over the server. They basically get effectively a session, like an SSH session, on that server at the top, and then from there they can start to kind of operate and figure out what they want to do next. So some common things that they do is identify additional targets. So they'll just start scanning the network and they'll say, cool, now that I'm on this machine, what else can I contact? What else can I own? Where's the data? What's the stuff that I want to do? That's known as moving laterally. So they'll try to SSH to other servers or services. They'll start actually sending the same request to other internal machines and see if they can move to those. And they'll also try to exfiltrate data at some point. Or they'll run some ransomware. Or they'll, you know, whatever, like try and steal sensitive documentation. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting one. This was also probably one of the biggest vulnerabilities that come out in the past few years. It was just incredibly simple to exploit. It was incredibly simple to patch, but people are very slow at patching. So to give you guys an idea of what this looks like, let's come back to this one. this is what an attack actually looks like. So what we have on the right here, please don't share this. So what we have on the right is actually some logs from one of our servers. This is something that's internet facing. You can find it if you try hard enough. But this is an attack against Airwalks' infrastructure, exploiting this vulnerability. And so what we have up on the top left is we have the actual URL that these attackers are using to try and pop that Log4j vulnerability. And you can see some really interesting parts to it, but you can see that JD and I, or GNDI, I can't remember what it's supposed to be, little string in the middle there. It has an IP address, which I've removed because it's a legit malicious IP address. And then it has this like exploit at the end, so you have the IP address, you have the class file that's being exploited, this exploit thing. And you can see some really interesting techniques that they're using as well. So you can see that they've added this user agent here, which a user agent is used to typically identify browsers or whatever's sending a request. This is spoofed, and this is actually for, I believe, super old version of Chrome, where they were like also still sending Mozilla user agents. Super weird. And you can also see at the front, they sent a request to us, but it was to an IP address. It wasn't to airwalks.com. And what they're trying to do here is they're trying to bypass all of the security controls that we have for airwalks.com by instead of routing the kind of, sending a DNS request to airwalks.com and then sending to that IP address, they send directly to that IP address to try and get around things like our WAFs and our other firewalls and any other controls. So it was really fascinating to actually kind of learn what this looks like in practice, and it's really easy for us to then set up rules and say, okay, cool, send us an alert or block any request that has JDI :LDAP in the URL or any of the headers that we don't worry about it. To give you guys an idea of the scale of this, so this is effectively all of the hits for the rule that we put to detect any Log4j exploits. So the 0 day was disclosed at the bottom left there, so it was on the 12th, it was quite late at night. And then, really fascinating, we put mitigations in place about an hour later, and an hour later we're up to about 80 attempts to exploit this. I don't know what unit of time this is, probably an hour. And the thing that's really fascinating is that even attackers like the weekend. So we have, actually this wasn't, so effectively you have a couple weeks of people waiting for like a bunch of proof of concepts to get posted online, so more details where they can start writing their own exploits and figure out how to bypass technical controls. And the thing that's really fascinating is you actually have like Saturday, Sunday, Monday. This is like weirdly offset for stupid reasons. But this peak here at 3:29 is actually on a Monday morning, and the reason for that is that you have people either writing exploits over the weekend or they show up on Monday and they're like, okay, cool, what am I going to do? I'm going to implement a scanner that's just going to like scan the internet to attack it. So in terms of how we actually operate when something like this comes out, we've got this mitigations applied section. This was about an hour after the 0 day was disclosed. And this is where being a software engineer actually becomes really helpful. This is very technical, very like software engineering vulnerability, right? Like it's an exploit that is going to impact basically every code base you have. And having that software engineering background, it means that we understand how we're deploying our software. We understand how containers work, with operators and so on. And so we're able to basically tell all of the teams to go and apply some environmental variables that we do with the fix. But we're able to also, in the matter of like half an hour, 40 minutes, basically like just put together a really simple script that would show us every vulnerability that we had for this particular exploit across our code base. And the way that we did it is the guy wrote Go because he wanted to write Go, he just wanted an excuse, but he wrote a script that would list all of our Docker images that we were publishing anywhere. So this is any of our services that we were executing. It moved all of those Docker images to a 64-core machine that was set up for multi-processing, and then implemented this little library called Sift, which allowed us to basically scan through all of those images, find any time Log4j was used, check what version was being imported, and then check the usage. And it's just something that, like, as a software engineer, you can start thinking about a script that would actually go through these things and find the kind of, like the little flags or whatever that are going to indicate that you need to patch this. And then obviously we do looking at engineering to patch it. But I thought that had we not had a software engineer on the team, this was also not my work, but had we not had a software engineer on the team, us implementing this probably would have taken a few days, or even like a couple of weeks. And then when you actually go and look at the volume of attacks, having a software engineer around meant that we were very, very much less likely to get exploited. Cool, so I am at time, I'm going to get people to start waving at me, telling me to get off stage soon. But that's the end of that. Yeah, hopefully it's given you guys a little bit of insight into what security is actually like, what kind of problems you deal with, and hopefully a little bit of a snippet around how you can kind of make that transition, but also how being a software engineer is really just a philosophy of life. Being able to think in systems, being able to go really deep on problems, being really curious about the world, those are all incredibly important skills that get beaten into you as a software engineer are incredibly valuable as well. Cool. Any questions? Yes, down the back.
Is there something that you wish you did at uni that would have like prepared you better for this, possibly?
Things I wish I did at uni. It's a good question. I wish that I had, like, the security papers that, actually, full disclosure, I lectured a security paper a couple of years ago here, just because I had spare time. Security papers here I found were actually very poor. And I say that because I rewrote all the slides when I started lecturing. I think that the thing I wish I had done is actually learn about security properly. And what I mean by that is like not just done like a network security paper here or done like the Android security paper, which was gross when I did it. But I wish I had actually just gone and read about the thing and like talked to people in the security industry. I think that this event is like one of the coolest things that is being hosted by the student group involved with software engineering. I think the idea of like explaining to people that you don't have to be a software engineer as a software engineer is incredibly valuable. So yeah, I think like just going and chatting to people that are in interesting roles and asking them what they do and what that looks like is a good place to start. Cool. Any other questions? Yes.
What date was that? Was it New Year's Eve?
It was not New Year's Eve.
It's kind of sad.
28, 29, 30. Oh, that may have been New Year's Eve actually. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, here's a little aside. I'm going to get told to shut up very soon, but a little aside. One of the ways that China's like cybersecurity kind of like espionage unit actually got attributed to China is because they always worked in CST, in like China, or CST, whatever the Shanghai time or Beijing time. And you could always see this notable drop in attacks over holidays, like national holidays in China. And that combined with a bunch of other like incredibly slow stuff meant that it was really obvious that, it was China performing. Yeah, attackers are people too. They don't like working on the weekends, see upticks during the week. So you also very commonly will see a spike of alerts on a Friday because people get into the zone, they're more productive throughout the week, and then they have something to ship on a Friday. It makes for really fucking annoying weekends sometimes. Cool. Anything else? Yes.
Did you think you were going to stay in security or you might move to like product management?
Yeah. Go back to this one. So, my product management strategy, yeah. I love security. It's just one of those things that's like incredibly deeply technical and you can never learn too much. I just also really love learning. I think learning is the coolest thing in the world. IT is the thing that surprised me the most. So my kind of like future plans at the moment is just to go really deep on both of those spaces. I think security is really obvious. You get to kick bad guys in the teeth all day and that feels really good. IT, I think you have the opportunity to have like a lasting impact on like the lives of everyone in your company. They all use your tools for 8+ hours a day, every day. When they have a shitty experience, they tell you about it. When they have a really good experience, your product gets better. You have more sales. It's a really like hidden, super interesting, high impact world that like doesn't get enough of. Cool. Alrighty. Thank you guys. We'll also be hanging around. We've got a shit ton of t-shirts that we don't want to have to take back, so please come and grab some. If anyone wants a random poster, I can also give you a poster. It's amazing. Thanks.
All right. thank you Ale Wallets firstly for sponsoring this event. So at the end we have some great food and catering. So we want to thank Ale Wallets. Next up, we have Adam from Xero.
Hey everyone, I'm Adam from Xero. Not gonna lie that coming back to the university just a few years later, standing in the lecture theatre is kind of terrified all day. It's amazing the things that you can sort of move past to get more confident as you go, and then there's the small things that remind you of things. Like the last time I standing in front of the lecture theatre was doing my part 4 presentation to Jdi Remote Lockup. It was pretty intimidating guys, you might remember. So it's also been cool. Went to uni with Elliot, so it's the first time I've seen him in about 8 years or so, which is awesome.
That's good.
I was feeling quite inadequate about my future presentation skills, and then I heard that he'd be lecturing, so no wonder he's good at it now. So it was an awesome presentation. So
That'll be cool, Adam.
so how many of you have heard talks from Xero before? Yeah, quite a few. So for those that haven't, we'll start with a couple of quotes from some of our artists. So we are a music software company. We make largely DJ software and also we use the music production market. So DJ Jason Gibb, may recognize him from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He's also an amazing hip-hop DJ. He says, I don't care why you know me, once I get you hit, I'm the reason here, I can't read. Once I get you in that building, my job is to convert you to a fan. I also have Erica Badu, who's an amazing soul singer, who also does DJing using our software. Music is the sixth element. It brings nostalgia, it brings healing, and it moves us. So the cool kind of two parts from this I take is, one, our products are used by people to work. This is their job, and they rely on us for their livelihood. And two, our products are used for creative expression in the artistic world. And so those are sort of two things that in our product we always have to balance in our decision making. Here's a cool picture for the hype. That's A-Track performing at a festival in California, I forget the name of it. As you can see, there's the UI of our software on this laptop. That's integrated with the DJ hardware that he is actually using. And this is our main piece of software that is the biggest piece of DJing software in the world, used by over 2 million people, which is what Analysts to report, which is cool. US is our main market, but we're an Auckland company, with about 150 employees. So I'm a product owner, also known as a product manager, as you just heard a little bit about, but product owner is the title used for that role when you're using the agile methodology of Scrum, which you may have been introduced to through uni. If not, you probably will immediately when you're doing these jobs. So we can kind of sum up product ownership using 3 buzzwords starting with V. First is vision, so representing the customer to the development team, and managing and communicating this through a product backlog. It's really important that this is really transparent and that everyone can kind of see the thing, and so that's why we kind of have this word vision to do that. So in my own personal role, I'm representing the DJ, the music producer, the product we're making, and we use personas for a lot of that. So if we're building a product for one of the kind of beginner DJ things, then we have these personas with attributes that we back up with analytics and data, and they will become the persona. So as this beginner DJ, what do they want? Because what they want is very different to what A-Track wants. I think we saw that picture, he might want some crazy feature, but he's the 0.1% of DJs. So yeah, so we use those personas to kind of create that vision. So value, so that backlog is a prioritized list of requirements for future product development. And so when working on a product feature, we'll have stories, as I'm sure you've come across these terms. If not, the lecture will teach you some useful stuff. This is all about adding value incrementally and doing regular releases and increasing the value of your product, consistent with time, adapting and learning from these changes. So, and in order to provide this value, product owner is the interface between stakeholders and the development team. So stakeholders can be the user, but it can also be, if you're working for a company that has funding, it could be people called investors or CEO or the development manager, it's all sorts of internal and external stakeholders. But the product owner is that interface between the development team, which in, as I mentioned, Agile, Scrum before, sort of 4 to 10 people, developers and testers. So the final D is validation. So it's really important to make user-informed decision making, observing and evaluating the outcome of a release. And we can do this through looking at reviews. We also have a whole bunch of analytics in our product that we can use to relate to these personas and see how people are behaving. I think we've got someone talking about analytics later on, so they'll be doing a much better job than I. And we also, but it's kind of cyclic because we also, to provide the vision and value, we are also doing prototype testing, surveys, etc. So it's, that kind of user interaction is really important throughout the whole development process, and product owner is at the core of that. So a little bit about my background, how I got to there. So I studied electrical engineering here at Auckland University, and at the same time I was also working as a musician. I sort of, coming out of high school, was sort of toying up, do I do a music degree, pursue the dreams, do I do electrical engineering and get a job? I actually came into engineering with the hopes of getting into acoustics. And I swore after that first year of general papers that I'm open-minded, but I'm definitely not doing electrical engineering. So year 2 comes around, I'm doing electrical engineering. And there's a few electives start coming in and things, and there's some software papers, there's like Comsys and there's ECM. Well, I'll never work for, no one ever worked for a software company, but I'll do the electrical one. So here I am working for a software company, having an electrical engineering degree. But at the same time, I was still doing this music stuff, and it's really important to me. And I had a big interest in sound. And a little anecdote, one of my second year lecturers played guitar, and he told us he's a great guitar student, so electrical department. And I went down to him as a fresh-faced second year, asking him, really interested to hear that you're a musician, and obviously you're doing this electrical stuff with filters and such. I'd love to chat with you sometime, like on how you see ways to combine these and what opportunities there are and what people have to take as ways to go forward into this area. And his advice was, give up the music and just focus on your studies. Which I did not do, and I'm very grateful that I did, because he was describing the pathway to which he got to his role, and he's extremely successful as one of the most technical and entering kind of, it's not even a word, but guys in the department. But that wasn't my path, and so I guess the point of introducing that little anecdote is that if you have something specific to your interests or an extra skill that lies outside of the technical thing, you might not know how it's going to work with that now, but it might come right. You might find that thing in the future. And with the software and technology industry, a bunch of you will work in jobs that you don't even know exist right now. And if you try and make those decisions right now based upon what you know now, you potentially close doors. And if there's anything that makes you or good at what you do, or with a perspective that's unique to you, that's powerful, and there's roles and places that you will find that. So eventually I finished my degree, 6 years, and I was working for a sound installation company, basically doing electrical technician work and I just got sick of steel cap boots in construction and applied for a job at Xero. And I applied for a job there as a QA, quality assurance, just like a software tester, so I was working within the development team. I did that for a couple of years, and my technical qualifications really helped me in that. And whilst I hadn't really engaged in the software assignments and just done the bare minimum to get through at uni, just the exposure to language, the concepts, the ways of thinking, some of the stuff that Elliot talked about, problem solving, looking at a system, breaking it down into smaller parts, how things interact, was suddenly so useful. And I was finding that even though I couldn't write the software that the software developers were, I could sort of think about it as components and how it interacted, and understand risk areas and things, and was able to be really effective in my role. So from there, I wanted to just develop and do more. So I was allowed to gain the title Software Test Engineer. So that involved writing automated tests in Python. And partly to the credit of our test framework being quite developed, it was very templatey and very uninteresting with this very like it was the BDD, business digital development, so it was just like all the functions were sort of word calls and which were here I am talking myself into a room of people that can develop 10 times better than me. But yeah, it just did not engage me. And it felt cool to learn like a bit of a skill again or use this thing, but it just was repetitive and mundane. And for me, that did not work with the way I like to work. And I think this is one of the reasons why this talk is cool today, is because just because you're good at software, like writing software, like coding, it might not actually be the way you want to spend your day, or that might not actually fit your personality. And there's so many ways that you can use that knowledge and those skills from there. So for me, I was finding being in the testing was at the end of the process chain and was very reactive. And I wanted to be able to work more proactively, have suggestions, have more creativity and problem solving, and be more in charge of my own work input, like of when I pick stuff up and do things, not just wait for something to be handed to me. And at that point was when I then decided to apply for the product team. And I'm going to move off that slide because it's kind of weird and regret that one. And yeah, and so it's like, when I think back to my electrical engineering degree, do I ever want to use any of it technically? No, I don't really have any interest in that. Do I regret doing it? No, because in my role as Xero in the products team, I'm the only person that comes from a technical background, and I do strongly believe that it puts me in a position to work with the development teams in a really effective way that's kind of unique to me within the company. And things like terminology or understanding risk areas or things, you kind of preempt things, and it's a tough kind of balance because sometimes as a product owner you're meant to represent the what and the development team represents the how. And you can get a bit, if you have some of that knowledge of the how, it can actually compromise your feeling of what, because you might say, oh, I'd like to do that, but it's probably going to be hard, so we won't do that. And present this other thing, when really good is actually problem solving it that you just want to be aware of. So, yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with that rant, but point being is that like there's a lot of room to use the technical skills and language that you have learned and are learning in non-technical roles, but to be able to then work in a completely different way that might enjoy it. So I don't like sitting down with my headphones on, just churning out work. Some people really like that, and that's the way to do it. I much rather talk about doing work than actually doing it myself. And I found a role in doing that. Yeah, I think, yeah. Yeah, do I have this one? No. Yeah, why not keep it stand? I don't want to say, don't say anything at all. Elliot.
Yeah, we didn't plan to say that. I'm curious, what was the most common question I got today after the like training? Yeah, was like, what is the most valuable set of skills to being like an effective product manager? So I just wanted to like ask you that, because I think you're more comfortable.
Yep. Interesting. I think that obviously communication is huge. As you're the conduit for stakeholders in the development team. So that's like communication is key in both in the written and spoken sense, because you're expressing specification and requirements in text, and it's actually a bit of an art to take all ambiguity out of language. It's really quite hard to do sometimes, and it's really interesting sometimes when you then take something to a development team and you think you've nailed the wording of something, and they'll be like, oh, what about this? Or I remember sometimes early on, like the way some verification criteria are written to satisfy them, you could actually do no work. And like, I'm trying to think of an example, but yeah, if you like just state like purely a negative case. Also, I don't know, like there's some things like that where you can get some kind of logical fallacies within your wording. So there's a like written and spoken communication. I think the other thing that's really important is your whole purpose of developing a product is to add value, and whether that's a feature that's useful to a user, or whether it's increased revenue to your company, or maybe it's increased cost of overhead of maintenance, or decreased cost of maintenance or something. And I think if you can like empower the development team to see the purpose of the why, you're going to get better results. And if they're on board with and are trusted and having like a transparent and trusting development team relationship, then it also empowers them to make suggestions and so solve problems in a creative way. Like I think if a product manager or owner micromanages the dev team, I think that can be quite restrictive and create sort of not a doesn't create like a safe space to raise ideas and to make suggestions. And sometimes like a development team to be allowed to make a mistake, just like we will do, and because that's the whole point sort of a lot of development frameworks is about inspection and adaptation. And so looking at what's been done, how can it be improved? So I guess an answer to your question, how do I answer it? I mean, and obviously knowing the domain and not being stuck in just what you want and thinking about the customer. So you mentioned empathy, and I think that's part of it too, just in, not just in like the emotional sense, but more just in the sense of understanding people's needs. The other really important thing is you got to be able to say no, because you will get asked, if you work in a product role, you get asked so many things, and like, can we do this, can we do that? And unfortunately afterwards, no, it's not that they're bad suggestions, but you can only do so much. And it's like, I've heard, I can't remember what it is, I wish I remembered it, but I heard a thing like this, like 40% of the software product is used by 10% of the people, or something, I don't know, something like one of those kind of things. And so if you took away that 40% of the product, most of your customers are going to be just as happy, but think how much at least you'd have to maintain everything. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as that, but that's kind of the concept. Yeah, after that?
Yeah. Do you think if you, knowing what you know now,
Yep.
Do you think you would have gone back and done like a tester role again, or do you think you would have like gone straight into product? Do you think like having that technical like work experience is necessary?
I don't think I would have, you actually remind me of what I wanted to make. I don't think I would have even known that role existed had I not done it. So, and I also don't know if I would have been able to advocate for myself to get hired within that role. For me, like, the tester role allowed me to bridge from, because it is it's a technical / user kind of role and domain. It allowed me to kind of take my technical background and then capitalize on my domain knowledge and move into a whole other industry. And the cool thing now is that through that product ownership, I could go to a completely different product and feel like I could add value to the company with nothing to do with music. So, because the concept learned from that. So, product owner roles and product manager roles are a really interesting one because there's no kind of like predetermined, there are courses you can do in qualifications, there's no kind of predetermined path. It's not like if you do this degree and do these papers, then you'll get a graduate role as it just kind of doesn't work like that. And so the other guy I was actually meant to talking to tonight is unfortunately sick. He started a marine biology degree and dropped out. Then he ended up working at Xero in support, customer support, then moved into the marketing team from there, and then from the marketing team to product owner. A lot of the product owners in our company have worked in testing, some of them come from support, but ultimately the thing that's allowed them to get into that role and is just really good domain knowledge, and that came from working in the company for a period of time. So obviously different industries are different, but I think any kind of experience had within any form of the software industry, you then couple that with like a desire, an interest in the product, and a desire to work in that way. And I think that like you can come at the product owner role from a lot of different angles. And like as Elliot said, some of the best developers come from development backgrounds. And I think it depends on the product, and it depends on the company, and it absolutely depends on the person. But as a role, it's a really cool way to work up further forward in the process chain, and you never run out of work to do, and never waiting sort of on someone to be like, and it's just the thing, I've had days without anything, and then somebody will come up to do it in 2 days and just say, that wasn't a nice way to work for me. Yeah. I have to shoot. Oh, you done?
I still have a question. What's the most like rewarding thing about your role?
I think just like the fact that my people who are like friends and things so I'm close to use this product, and it's like, and they've used it for their livelihoods for a decade. Yeah, it's really cool that the big artists and stuff use it, but to me it's really cool that like people that I care about benefit from the work we do. That's quite cool just seeing that in this that website. That's cool. Yeah. So, I unfortunately can't stick around till later, but Julia and Raymond have my email address if you have any other questions or want to ask any more about product owner roles or Serato, and if there's other interest you have from Serato and other kind of areas outside of product ownership, I can put you in touch with those that do look after those areas. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you, Adam. So I believe our next speaker is Julia from Compatriots, who is unwell and unfortunately has to call in from Zoom today. So feel free to talk amongst yourselves while I sort out the technical things.
Are you guys gonna go? You guys in your hand? There'll be big boxes. Three or four. Feeling strong today, guys? Feeling strong? They're like this big. Oh. Yeah. I was like, they're big boxes.
Yeah. Where's the Isha? Yeah. Would you go?
Oh.
250 words.
I'm craving to go outside. What's up? Do you need me to come with you? Are you going? Okay. Oh. Are you going? You have stuff to do.
I'm just going.
Filling in your contract.
You want me to start talking? Or?
Whoa.
So we have really busy dates. Would you like to share a PowerPoint slide with me?
No, I've got no slide. I'm just going to run a chat. Is there any way to see what's going on in the room? Or?
Oh.
Hello.
Oh,
Excuse my voice. I'm just recovering from COVID, so you'll have to bear with me. I know as I can't really talk and I don't really feel that great, but what I can say is that my career is much more stimulating than I may actually present to you today. I don't quite have the enthusiasm and energy I usually have for these kinds of chats. What I thought I would do is I would have a quick chat about what I do, but then raise some questions, please, with me around the career paths or the kind of the interests or functional interests that you have as far as the actual work that you want to do within the tech sector. Because there are multiple different paths and probably a whole bunch of occupations and jobs that people don't really know about that emerge from doing a technical degree. So just let me tell my story first. Excuse me. I originally started studying and I did a double major, the BSc with chemistry and physiology, and graduated that and realised that I was going to spend my life in a lab coat, which is not really what I wanted to do. So I went back and did a postgraduate degree in business IT, and so graduated actually from AUT with a postgraduate degree in business technology. And what that meant was I was able to have a whole bunch of domain knowledge around the technology industry and the systems and the way that people worked. But I chose not to go down the programming path. My natural talents, and I think this is something people need to figure out, my natural talents are with people, and with influencing people, and with telling stories. And so consequently, it wasn't the right thing for me to be stuck behind a keyboard, nor to be in a kind of a QA role. So I chose to go down the sales path, and then I went into recruitment. And I think what's critical for people to understand is that there are a bunch of different things in your life, activities that you do, that you would do whether you got paid for them or not. And what I mean by that is working with people and influencing people, being a great organizer, or working out how to provide predictable delivery. These would be things that you do in your life anyway, when you organize a holiday with your friends, or when you try to work out how to complete your studies effectively, or the roles that you're playing in the project teams. And so it's really important as you go through your degree to kind of make a mental note of the stuff that you really love doing. And what you'll find is that both in your personal life and your academic life, there'll be things that surface, like, for instance, building relationships, or creating delivery systems, or having a quality initiative, or thinking about where the marriage of kind of something commercial and something technical overlap. And what that'll mean is that there will be a way for you to manifest those activities within the jobs that you have. Now, I was lucky enough to figure out that I was pretty good with people, and so I went down the path of heading into recruitment, which means I try and understand what people's skills are and then marry them up with the jobs that are going to be most meaningful and engaging and are going to get them in the direction of the career that they want to go. And so what that's meant is that I spend all my time talking about technology, but not actually having to build any technology, or test any technology, or deliver any technology. I get to talk about what people's dreams are and how they want to be most meaningfully engaged in their careers. And that's led me to help to grow all sorts of technology businesses. It's been a healthy kind of economic return for me, and it's also allowed me to pursue a passion for guiding people's professional lives, but then also by proxy, I've been able to invest in technology startups and businesses and work with those organisations to develop their strategies and to grow into profitable businesses as well. So recruitment's been a real dream and a real gift for me, but what it's allowed me to do is focus on the stuff that I really like doing and find a commercial interest for that, and a job that celebrates all the skills and the kind of the capabilities that I have in a natural sense, and apply my learnings. I'm keen to talk a little bit about the kind of the jobs that are available to people who actually have technical skills and capabilities that don't want to be programmers. Can I have a show of hands who actually wants to be a programmer when they graduate from their degree? Okay, so that looks like roughly about 40% of the people that are there. What does everyone else want to do? Is anyone interested in testing? Anyone else interested in product, sales, delivery? Are those things that people are curious about and the paths to get into them? I guess so? Okay, cool. So what I've found is that systems engineering, software engineering, software development, computer science, they're all great courses that equip you with quite a lot of technical knowledge. And the projects are meant to equip you with the kind of the practical skills to be able to launch you into a career. What you'll find is that there'll be things that you like to do and things that you don't like to do within your academic projects and within the kind of the actual studies themselves. And what I can say is that if you enjoy working with people and you enjoy communicating, and you like to focus on the big picture, then product ownership, product management, and product leadership can be a really good path where you are the hub that sits between all the different parties and stakeholders that are involved in producing any kind of software. Whether that be the customers, whether that be the support team, whether it be the QAs, whether it be the engineering, whether it be the marketing. And so your job is to be able to communicate and understand the priorities of each of those different people and be a little bit of a chameleon in the sense that you've got to stay on target about what is actually going to make your product sticky and commercially successful, whilst also being able to deliver value to your customers, whilst also working within the constraints of what's technologically possible. And so I found that when people are coming out of university, they really don't know what product was. And so I'd encourage you to have a look into that field if programming doesn't really seem to fit with you as far as problem solving, the types of problems that you're solving, and the type of approach and what you imagine your working days looking like. If you like delivery, and so that is around being able to be accountable for landing something at a particular time, at a particular place, in a particular way, within the parameters that have been set out, then that can be a really well paid, but also quite fun and stimulating job. And so you'll see a natural path if you're finding yourself in that role within academia, to go down the path of becoming a Scrum Master. And then you can head into product ownership, and then into project management, into a product delivery style role or delivery management role, and then ultimately in a program manager role, and then perhaps even into a COO style role with a software vendor or in a technology-centric business. This is not a naturally kind of career path that people tend to come straight out of university with, but if you're finding that solving technical problems is not going to be enough for you, it can be an excellent proposition to be able to get involved with orchestration and in understanding predictable delivery processes and systems. What I've also seen more recently is people transitioning from out of front-end development and into UX and UI, which is kind of like changing from being an engineer to being a psychologist and an artist. Now, just because you have a technical background doesn't mean that you can't translate those skills, and it can actually make you incredibly effective. So if you like the design space, and you like the look and feel of things, and trying to understand how your customers or your users are going to want to use that piece of software and how to make it more enjoyable for them, and that can be a wonderful path to pursue as well. And it really isn't a bridge too far to go from creating interfaces to designing interfaces. Beyond that, I think that one thing that we don't get a really good sense of in university is people leadership. Now, people leadership is in every business, it's in every job. There will be someone who is a manager and a leader, and sometimes both of those things are the same person. Now, leadership and management are a little bit different. Leadership is, can be leading by example, it can be showing people the best way. Management is about connecting with those people, being able to understand what makes them tick, so that you can help them to get the best performance out of themselves. So again, just because you have technical skills, that can be really strong in becoming a people leader. People leaders need to be able to relate to their teams, and often the dev manager or the dev lead may not be the best developer in the team. They'll be the person who's gravitated towards the delivery or a people leadership capacity within that business. So we need more people leaders in the technology sector, that's absolutely true. So if you have a need or you like to be in a role where you are helping people to be successful and clearing the way for them to be able to do their jobs effectively, and being someone who wants to connect with those people and help them to be the best versions of themselves at work, then that can be a wonderful and quick transition straight up from a junior role. Just because you don't feel like you've got that experience coming out of university doesn't mean you can't pursue it as a functional area of expertise in the short to mid-term. So that was just really some of the things I wanted to raise today about what possible paths exist for you once you graduate and once you start to work. Technology, people leadership, delivery leadership, product leadership, quality leadership are all just as good as each other. Most of the headcount in the technology sector is in developers. They make up the numbers within the workforce, but that is changing as those roles, other roles that we've talked about, become more and more critical for the success of enterprises and product vendors themselves. Any questions about any of that stuff? Come on, someone's going to ask me what they get paid.
Hey Julian, can you hear me?
Yep.
We've got an anonymous question that came from the audience. Just give me a second, I'll pull it up to read out to you. From an undergraduate perspective, how do you balance the want for a high-paying job and the want to follow your passion, especially if those two things don't align?
Yeah, I'd say, so this is just my thinking. People talk about passion, but no one really knows what passion is as it comes to their work. And so what I say is I will get to that answer, but we're play, so the stuff that you would naturally do whether you got paid for it or not, whether it's solving technical problems, whether it's building relationships. And purpose, so your why, what your kind of search is for, what the impact you want to have in your career is, where those two intersect is where passion sits. If you have a natural interest and a natural love for something, if you're great at that thing, you will get paid best for it. And I do believe that is always the case. I know people who solve technical problems for a living. They don't have any commercial leadership, they don't have any delivery leadership, but they get paid exceptionally well. They get paid, $150, $170 an hour to do what they love, which is solve technical problems as developers. If you love QA, it's the same. If you love delivery leadership or design, it's the same. You can always find an outlet for that capability and that dream within the technology sector. I assume you talk about technical skills or functional skills. There will be a path for you to be able to earn a lot of money. You just got to work on your craft and become the best at it, or one of the best at it, and you'll get paid exceptionally well for pursuing your passion. That's the end.
Well, we've got another one come in anonymously, which is, do you have any insight on why the New Zealand tech workers get paid less than their compatriots in Australia?
It depends. So I would say actually in some cases they get paid more or equal. There are certain organizations that pay a lot of money, like Atlassian, like Google, and they don't have offices in New Zealand. Now I know people who work in New Zealand for Atlassian that get paid really great money. Most Australian organizations, I would say, don't pay as well, in a perm capacity or pay around about the same that New Zealanders get paid. What people often do is they compare the top 5% in one country with another country. Now, Australia is a big, rich country, and the top 5% over there get paid more than the top 5% here. But then the top 5% here may well work for Silicon Valley companies offshore. So when it comes to money, most of the mid-range roles, or the kind of the middle of the market where the bulk of the numbers sit and the jobs sit, are around about the same. Now, when it comes to contracting, the projects are bigger, the teams are bigger, the impact is bigger on the projects that happen in Australia. So if you work on a contract capacity for NAB or for some massive, payments company, you probably will get paid a bit more than you get paid here And it's just to do with the gravity and the impact of those projects and how critical they are. And bearing in mind that the competition over there is more fierce for those roles, and so they, again, they've got a higher population. The New Zealand tech, the Australian tech sector is probably more mature than the New Zealand tech sector, not by much, but a little bit. So I would kind of disagree in general that people are paid a hell of a lot more in Australia, but there are stories of people earning a lot of money in contracting in Australia as compared to New Zealand. However, over the last 12 months or so, our rates have increased, and the Australian rates have kind of not increased percentage-wise as much as in New Zealand.
Awesome. The person who asked it, great clarity. Thanks, Julian. Just another question that came in is, they said from a lot of the presentations so far around product, it seems like it's really important to have support from the company itself, so the biggest company culture. What was your thought on that?
Can you say that again, man? Sorry.
Considering the sort of the pathways into product, it seems that support from the company and internally is really important into moving into sort of that career, which is not sort of well defined. And they're wondering if you have any insight on that, how true it is.
Yeah, look, I think that because of the multifaceted nature of product, where you are the intersection of all of these different things in the business, oftentimes people will, they'll wait for you to earn your stripes doing something else before you get into that role. But I do think that the key is first of all, the key is to persevere and to stay on target and reach that goal, to be able to get that opportunity. And if that doesn't exist within the organisation that you're in currently, and you keep getting passed over, then you should move and look for an opportunity, which is documented and written into any new contract or kind of communications that you have within a new organisation to transition into that role. Product is difficult, and so often it can take for you to spend time within that organisation to understand how it works before you can step into that role. Bearing in mind that product ownership is around the prioritisation of the backlog, and so you're working with an already set out product strategy and roadmap, and then you're trying to deliver features that are being reprioritised based upon engineering and sales and marketing's needs. So what I would say is that if you put your hand up and you play that role in some capacity before you're paid to play that role, that can work really well in your advantage to be able to try and develop the skills quickly to be able to step into that role in some capacity. If you're in a dev capacity or a QA capacity, it is reasonably easy to shift into that. It's just if you're good at those jobs, people want to keep you in them. You just got to keep putting your hand up and asking for that support, asking for those opportunities.
Awesome. I think that's all that's come through. If anyone else in the audience wants to speak up themselves, so we'll do the last call. Otherwise, big round of applause. Thank you so much, Julie.
Cool. Thanks, team. Have fun. And if you do need any career advice or any, you'd like any help with anything, please do reach out to me or my team, and we'll be more than happy to have that conversation and design a pathway.
Thanks so much, Julian. So I think now we'll get on to the next speaker. If I just figure out how to work. There we go. So I'd like to welcome Catherine Sun from Xero to talk a bit more about product insights and analytics. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Kat. Since we have a long title, Product Insights and Analytics Manager. I think today I'm going to talk a little bit more about, what is analytics, and there's a bunch of different careers in data. I know most of you guys have heard like data scientists and machine learning and stuff like that. Happy to spend some time on that, even though that's not what my team does. But feel free to jump in if that's what you guys are interested in. Just ask questions. I don't have any slides, very unstructured, so yeah, feel free to raise your hand. Cool, so Xero, hopefully you guys all know what Xero does, but if you haven't, there's a bunch of ads on TV right now. Basically, Xero is a software for accountants and bookkeepers. Actually, most of the time it's for small businesses, but small businesses don't really want to do their own accounts because it's like not a lot of fun and they just want to run their business. So Xero is like a platform of products, and it's a New Zealand kind of tech success story. Been around for about 14 years. Grew out of two guys in the garage, and now we've got about over 3,000 employees globally, not just New Zealand. And we have over 3 million small businesses around the world that are using Xero day to day to keep on top of their finances, do business, and manage their employees. So yeah, I've been at Xero for about 3 years, and in that time I started out as a data analyst, which I'm going to talk about that role more because the manager side is just like I manage a team of analysts and they do cool stuff and I just tell the business about it. But yeah, data analysts in the product space, we predominantly, our goal is to support product managers within the organization with the best data for the decisions that they make around, for example, their roadmaps and which customers are we building for, understanding the needs of the customers and how they're currently engaging with the products that we have, understanding the opportunities. So basically, we're trying to make sure that every decision that's made within Xero has some element of data and quantitative, because a lot of people just make kind of gut decisions and it's very easy to do, but with data we can actually validate and de-risk some of those things, because with 3 million customers, like if you do the wrong thing and it's very costly, wastes a lot of engineers' time, and it doesn't actually add value to the business, or maybe makes the customer's experience worse, which is the worst thing. Like, we definitely don't want that to happen. So the tools that we use day to day are things like SQL or SQL, Python, R. There's a bunch of other sort of dedicated analytics tools and platforms, but like the analysts themselves will look at the raw data and then use the data to try and provide like digestible recommendations for our product managers, our product marketing people, the leadership within Xero, so that we know that the decisions we're making are the best ones for the company and the customers. And so visualizing data and telling stories with data is a big part of the job. So if you love to like communicate and if you love to, I'm always quite nosy, like if someone says, oh, we're doing this thing, like, well, where's the proof? Like, where's the data to prove this is the right thing to do? This is sort of our role within the product teams. So yeah, like I said, we work really closely with the product managers, but also a bunch of other people that are involved in making sure product gets built. So things like the sales team, the marketing team, the researchers and UX designers, because they also want to know like who's using mobile to look at this view versus desktop, and if we're going to improve this experience, what's the best kind of bang for buck, essentially. And yeah, basically, like my view is that I think data is at the core of everything, and more and more, especially companies going digital, they all have, they're starting to realize the value of the things that they know about their customers and what their customers are doing. Of course, it's a responsibility to make sure that we're not using that for, like Cambridge Analytica sort of purposes. But if you really want to build a good product, you really need to check that you understand who you're building for and you understand that the things that you're delivering is actually making their experience better. So yeah, that's a bit about, I guess, analytics. Within Xero, there's a bunch of different data teams. So we help product. There's also customer analytics, marketing analytics. What else? There's the data space where we have machine learning engineers that actually build, like I think Elliot mentioned that there's the OCR. So we actually have a team of machine learning engineers that build the algorithms and stuff to to actually provide the experience for the customers. But within our team, we help measure that. Yeah, how many people are actually using this OCR that we spent like months building? And how do we make them maybe discover that feature, and instead of people manually wasting time on the old UI, go to the new one. And yeah, it really, like, our ultimate goal is to make running small businesses like a lot more like stress-free and seamless. Like, if you know anyone that has a business, you know that there's already enough to do as it is. So the less time spent on those admin tasks, the better. Cool. So yeah, my journey into analytics is definitely, like, I thought it was unique, but I think most of the people within tech companies have their own random way that they ended up in the company. I studied mechanical engineering and I graduated here in 2016. Halfway through my degree, I realized this is like not for me. Like, I don't want to be designing like a little part of this product for 3 years and then maybe the design gets scrapped and, like, you know, my work is wasted. So I kind of decided I wanted to finish my degree because sunk cost fallacy, and then look for a job out of uni that was maybe more like interesting. So to be honest, I was a bit lost. And then at the recruitment event, I found out about consulting. So my grad role actually was within Deloitte in the technology consulting team. To be honest, I didn't know what consulting was, but I think having got the job and sort of, you know, gone through the interview process, it's really about problem solving, which is, I think, the core of like engineering. It's just different types of problems and different techniques that you use to solve them. And I spent about 2.5 years at Deloitte working on a bunch of different like tech projects. So my first role was a project coordinator on a massive implementation of the software, and that implementation took 2 years. I was really bored by the end of it, but I think that kind of taught me some of just opened my eyes to like how important technology is to all businesses, and how like having better processes that are powered by technology is really valuable. And there's a bunch of different roles that are available in that area that you don't have to be technical. But I think coming from a more technical background, I wasn't as intimidated by those fields as maybe some other people that are trying to break into tech as an industry. So yeah, with Deloitte, I did a little project on the side with the common operations, which was quite interesting. We were looking at how we can improve, basically cut costs on how much we were spending on people spending time in prison when they didn't have to because they were waiting their sentencing. So with that project, I was able to work with a lot of data and realized how valuable having data is to kind of as a catalyst for change. So I was able to like help them measure that, and then in the end they decided to invest in this program, which was actually going to make people that didn't have to spend time in prison like go home earlier and spend time with their families. I don't know. So that was why I kind of became really interested in analytics, and then had no idea, I guess, how to break through into that industry. So I did a lot of Googling and sort of like asking around, like, you know, does anyone work in this space? And I think initially I was interested in data science, and then looking at the range of roles, I wasn't so interested in sort of, you know, designing like complicated algorithms or like using statistical methods, but I really wanted to know how data could impact businesses and like cause people to do something differently. So I did a bit of my own projects like alongside my regular job, started like a few different courses online, didn't quite finish them, but kind of gave me a bit of confidence that I still remembered how to code, and like I think I can bluff my way through an interview. Don't tell Xero about them. But yeah, when I applied for the data analyst role at Xero, it was kind of like a moonshot. I was like, I really think the company is doing something cool, and I think my consulting background and my technical background could work if they're willing to take a chance on me. And they were, I was really lucky that they were. And I think one of the learnings from that is, kind of when you know your strengths and the skill sets that you bring, it doesn't have to exactly align to the role that's being advertised, but if you can kind of sell that, and you might be bringing something to the role that they didn't know that they actually were looking for. And I think my boss was saying that they would rather have someone who is slightly, brings something new to the role than sort of a cookie cutter. They might have studied it all throughout uni, or there's analytics, there's analytics management courses and stuff, which I'm not bagging on that. It's definitely valuable if you're interested, but it's not a prerequisite to getting a job in that field. And I think really having that data analyst role, I was able to just kind of found my passion, which I didn't have all throughout uni, or even at Deloitte, to be honest. It's a really cool space, and I think lots of demand and insights, and you can be really technical. You can go into that data science, the data engineering space, or you can be sort of on analytics side and close to the business. There's a really wide range, and sort of the demand is only growing. So if you're interested in kind of spitting facts when someone says something that you don't agree with, getting the hands dirty and discovering lots of things that people might not have been looking for using the data, it's a really cool career. Happy to answer any questions if I have time. Okay, cool. Happy to answer any questions. Cool.
Just kind of relating to history. Do you think you would have thrived quite as much in this role had you have not done the consulting role and perhaps gone straight into an analytics role?
That's a really good question. I think consulting is a really good stepping stone to a lot of different careers. I guess what it gives you is kind of the really, you get a lot of experience in diverse companies and how different companies do things and how businesses are structured and hierarchies and who makes the decisions and what it takes to get things done. So, and also to communicate to senior leadership. If you're in the room enough, you realize that they're just people. They're not that intimidating, and you can communicate in a way that makes them listen to you and take away what you're saying and change what they're doing. So I think consulting is actually a really good experience, and I would recommend it. I think if I hadn't done that role, I probably wouldn't have the confidence to kind of apply for an analytics role without any experience. But it's not a prerequisite, I think. And there's a lot of actually I've hired a few people in my team that went straight from a mechanical engineer into analytics, it's just the mindset that I think the problem solving skills that all sort of engineering graduates get, and breaking the problem down and not being put off by things that look really complicated. I think that kind of skill set is what's really beneficial for this role. Anything else?
You say the role is about finding cool insights. Do you have any really cool insights or things that were maybe counterintuitive that you found out?
Yeah, so actually I can, so one of the, I guess highlights of my career at Xero is that the product area that I look after, they have a suite of products, one of which is payroll, and traditionally kind of payroll's been sold as small businesses need to pay their staff. That's the whole reason why you get a payroll solution. And so when I joined, one of my first classes was to actually look at all the different areas of payroll, different features that we have, and look at how many customers are using it, what types of customers are using it, what does that growth trend look like over time. And one of the parts of Xero Payroll is this like little mobile app called Xero Me, which is like developed by like one dude in San Francisco, and like he had lived and like nobody had touched it for years. So I was like, oh, I wonder what the growth looks like for this app, which is like it's not even like marketed in all of our like payroll like ads and stuff. Like it's kind of like an afterthought. Like actually, we make it really hard for customers to even find out about it. So I looked at this growth, and over the last year it had grown by 70%, and it was like thousands and thousands of users, and the users of that app are actually the employees of small businesses, and basically it had like one of the only functionalities that people were using was checking their payslip. And so I presented this insight to like the leadership team, and the GM of the space, she was like mind blown, because we didn't actually even know that we were our products were being used by employees of businesses. Like we always think about accountants, bookkeepers, small businesses, but the fact that we have this reach of like, you know, I think it was something like 250,000 people, and it grown by itself with like no marketing over a year. That insight kind of really made her think this is something that has potential. So as a result of that, the whole division sort of strategy changed, and we talk about users not as just small businesses, but also the employees of the small businesses, and how employees are actually like a network effect. You know, like if you use Xero Me when you're, you know, at your part-time job, and you go to another company that doesn't have an accounting software, maybe you'd be like, oh, I want to check my payslip on my phone instead of having to wait for an email. Like, can you just use Xero? So yeah, I think that's definitely one of the examples of how when you're not looking for something, you know, there's so many opportunities that are lost. And I think a lot of companies now are really looking for data for the competitive advantage. Like you really need to know your customers and know that you're doing the best for them. And you can't really do that with just waiting for them to complain, because not many people fill out feedback forms. You know. Cool. Anything else? Any other questions? I'll be outside later if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Catherine, for speaking. Next up, we have Lachlan from Aurora.
Got the job title wrong.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I'm not head of IT
No,
anymore.
sorry. Let's find the label slides.
Yeah, there we go. Cool. Okay. Can you hear me good? Yeah, cool. So yeah, thanks all for coming along tonight, and thanks for DEVS for hosting this, inviting me here. So yeah, my name's Lachlan. I'm a security consultant, which I know sounds maybe a bit boring at first, but trust me it isn't. I work at this great company called Aura Information Security, and our office is just down in Victoria Street West. So yeah, the term security consultants may be a little bit vague, but an easier way of sort of talking about what I do is I consider myself to be a professional hacker. So a bit about my background first. I don't actually have any certifications that gives me a right to do the job I do. I didn't go to uni. I didn't even do my NCAs. I spent my teenage years doing software and web development for cash instead. But yeah, so I know that a lot of people here obviously go to university, and that is obviously a great path, but yeah, other ways of doing things. So I'll talk a bit about what I mean when I say I'm a professional hacker. So we hear the word hacker sometimes in movies, media, and it's sort of lost a bit of its meaning, and it's important to sort of drill down and understand what it means. So Wikipedia defines a hacker, or a security hacker, someone who explores methods for breaching defenses and exploiting weaknesses in a computer system or network. And when we think about this, a lot of the things we immediately think about are criminals, right? You think about the news headlines when you saw why Capital DHB got hit by a big cyber attack. There was the big SolarWinds hack recently, which led to the biggest compromise in the US government in recent history. But there's more to it than just that. So when we talk about hackers, we often categorize them into three groups. So the first one is sort of the traditional thing we hear about on media is these so-called black hat hackers. On the other side, we have what we call a white hat hacker. And then somewhere in the middle, we have what we call a gray hat hacker. So yeah, black hat hacker, pretty straightforward, sort of criminals. They hack things to, exfiltrate information to get money. They want to set stuff on fire, and a lot of the time they end up in jail. So don't do that. In the middle, we have the gray hat hacker. This is the sort of person who hacks stuff for fun. For example, they might, find a weakness in a university's forum system and make a picture of a worm spread around the forum for fun, which I've heard about happened maybe at the University of Auckland. On the other hand, you have the white hat hacker. So, a white hat hacker is somebody who hacks things with permission to discover vulnerabilities and then ultimately disclose to the companies what these vulnerabilities are so they can get fixed and we can all live in a dandy, nice and secure world. So that's me, that's what I do, and that's what I get paid to do. So being a professional hacker, sort of day to day what that actually looks like. So I'm a security consultant, so I work for a consultancy firm. So some sort of these professional hackers or penetration tester roles, you might have internal roles in a company where you're working for that company, always going at the same systems. What I do as a consultant is I'm working on a new customer every week or every month. So customers come to us, they pay us a bunch of money, and we hack their systems. So in terms of what I'm doing day to day, I might be hacking one of my customers' websites, trying to get into their e-commerce system, might be hacking their mobile apps or breaking into their desktop apps. Another cool thing would be hacking networks. So in terms of either trying to go from the perspective of, what if someone in Russia was trying to break into your network from an outside perspective, trying to emulate the adversary in that sort of way, or even hacking Wi-Fi networks. So one thing that I might be doing for one of my customers, sitting in a cafe next door, trying to get a big aerial next to me, trying to sniff their Wi-Fi traffic, trying to crack the handshakes and see if I can gain access, either sensitive information or access to their networks. Another thing we do a lot of is social engineering. So effectively what we get to do is, almost all of us have received at some point an email that says, hello, I'm a prince from Nigeria, please give me $10,000 and I'll give you millions. And a lot of the time these sort of phishing emails we see are quite pathetic, but what we do is we do what we call spear phishing. So we're building targeted attacks against our customers, where we'll email employees saying, hey Bob, it's so-and-so from your IT department at Example Company. We need you to click on this link and give us your password so we can make sure that it's up to our security standards. We'll try and pretend, we'll register a domain name, we're going to try and pretend to be that customer. So if our customer is example.com, we might register example with 2 L's, and we're trying to create a fake page to steal their passwords. And then from there, we'll see what we can do, what the damage is. So my job is to sit behind the computer, send out these malicious emails, harvest passwords, break into networks using the passwords we steal. And then at the end of the day, once I've sort of done all this stuff, I write reports. Because it's all well and cool if you can do some really cool hacking, exploit things, get into networks. But one important thing about being a consultant is then explaining to our customers what the vulnerabilities are, how they can fix them, and what the real risk is presented to their company, so they can prioritize what they're going to fix, and they actually understand what the problems are. Other things I'll be doing, jumping on video calls with my customers, help giving them good pragmatic advice, and sort of some of the slightly more boring parts of my role is I'll be doing like pre-sales and stuff, got to make sure the stuff we sell actually works. So why I love this role? I'll be honest, the way that I'm going to sort of attack this talk is I'm going to try and convince you that what I do is really, really cool, because I think it's really, really cool, and that it's a growing industry and we need more people in it. So I thought that the best way would be to describe sort of my average week and give you an actual example from a few months ago. So we had a new customer. They came to us saying, hey, look, we're trying to really progress on what we call a security journey, which is a term you hear a lot. So yeah, a bit crummy. But so they came to us and said, okay, we've done a little bit of security work. We think we're in a good place, but we want you guys to have out. So we want to see what our risk is now that we've invested all this money into our security. So I was given the task of spending 5 days, so 1 week, of coming from the perspective of an external attacker trying to breach this company's defenses. This company was a fairly large, well-known New Zealand retail chain, like over 100 stores across the country. And so I went through the exact same process that a malicious actor, someone in Russia or whatever, trying to break into their systems would do. First thing you do, go ahead, you're going to try and research the company, see what things they expose to the internet, find their VPN portals, find the applications their staff use, find their main targets and sort of where the goodies would be. Say, naturally had a very large e-commerce site, thousands of people order there every day. So as part of my reconnaissance, I'd gone through and I'd had a look through their website, and I found they had a contact us form and a whole bunch of information about all their stores. And I noticed all of their stores had email addresses listed as their contact information. So part of the reconnaissance phase is, if we're wanting to start maybe at some point breaking into accounts, we need to know usernames. So I went through and I noticed, okay, for Auckland Central, it's Auckland Central at, examplecompany.co.nz. There was Newmarket at whatever, and Wellington and so forth. So I'm like, okay, I built up this list of emails, and I'm having a look and I'm wondering, what are the entry points into this organization? And there's a phrase that's been going around a bit that I actually quite like, which is hackers don't hack in, they log in, which sort of effectively, yes, what I do a lot of the time is these really cool, highly technical exploits, but a lot of it can actually be really brought down to the human factor and finding ways to compromise accounts. So in this case, I had a list of 100 different email addresses, and I sort of thought, okay, think about the sort of scenarios that are existing in a business like this. So I'm going through, once again, using the exact same hacker mindset. So I'm thinking, a lot of these businesses have a lot of casual staff, a lot of part-time staff, high staff turnover. A lot of the time you see in these sorts of scenarios is weak shared passwords, because when a new temporary staff member starts, you need to tell them all the passwords straight away, they need to be able to remember them, and so forth. So in my reconnaissance phase, I found they had this thing called store manager login or something. And my sort of guess was, this is where store employees go on to manage stock, see orders for click and collect, issue refunds, that sort of stuff. And so, dead simple attack. I took a list of 100 different email addresses I had. Over lunchtime, just before I went for lunch, I set up an attack where I was just guessing hundreds of passwords a second for each of these accounts. Went out, grabbed a burger with my colleagues, came back, and I found that one of the stores had the password 123456. And so I was like, okay, cool, getting somewhere. So I log into the system and have a look. I'm in this really cool back end. I issue myself a $500 gift voucher as proof of the risk. My customer wasn't too pleased with me doing that, but hey, I think it's still valid. Had a look around. I could look at customer details. I could see orders that had recently been placed, click and collect information. I could issue arbitrary refunds. I thought, okay, this is cool, but it's still kind of limited. I was having a look at some of the JavaScript code that was being sent to my browser. I saw there was a lot of reference in the code to admin button, admin panel. I was like, okay, I don't see any admin stuff here. But I had to read through the code, and I saw one of the slightly more depressing things I've seen in recent times, which was, it was more or less, if user.isAdmin show buttons. And so all this website was doing was, if I wasn't an admin, it was hiding buttons from me, but all the functionality was still there. So 5 minutes later, I just re-showed the buttons and I was in the admin interface. So from there, I found a cool exploit where I could trick the website into uploading an executable file I gave it, and 10 minutes later, I'm sitting there with a PowerShell session in front of me on their production e-commerce server. From there, I looked around to see, okay, where am I on the network? I could see that this was their production network where a lot of their front-facing apps were. So there's a database server I could connect to. So I went, okay, let's have a look in here. Connect there, can see credit card numbers, which they shouldn't be storing unencrypted. I saw all sorts of employee information, customer information, stock information. But most interestingly, within the e-commerce section of their database, I have a users table, which is where user details are stored. So, customer information. But I also noticed a lot of the employees had accounts there. Kind of makes sense that employees would make accounts within, their company's e-commerce store. So I had a look through there, and I managed to pull down 300 username, email addresses, and password hashes for all those employees. So password hash is a sort of an obfuscated form of a password. It's a representation of the password, but it doesn't give you the password itself. But what you can do is, if you use a powerful enough computer, which we have down in Wellington, you can leave it overnight and attack to automatically try and break those cryptographic hashes to get the password. So it was about 5 p.m., called it a day, went to bed, woke up the next morning and found that I had 3 different employee passwords. So I'm like, okay, cool, I've broken into the e-commerce site, I can commit fraud at this point, I've got credit card details, I've got employee passwords, and it's day 2. So where to from here? So once again, hacker mindset. Now I've got something, where can I go from here? Well, I went back to what I discovered initially during my reconnaissance phase. They had a VPN, so I tried the passwords there, it doesn't seem to work. But they had this file sharing system. It's sort of like a OneDrive or Dropbox, but they host it themselves. I found that just one of those 3 or 4 passwords I cracked got me in, and I was greeted with a beautiful screen, corporate network share. You click on it, I see financial team. Click on there, see employee salaries.xls, see bonuses.xls, financial details.xls, board salaries. Okay, that could be interesting, but got to respect my customer's privacy to some degree. But okay, cool, this is real impact. This is somebody from the other side of the world who break into their network using these techniques, and they can start retrieving these files. But I didn't stop there. I noticed this folder, IT documentation, and anytime you get into a network, that's the sort of place you look, because you always find something really stupid. And in this case, I found a file called vpnpasswords.txt. You can imagine that in there, funnily enough, there were passwords for their VPN. And I noticed they had this weird format. It was something like AKL01, Auckland 01 something. And I realized these correlate to store numbers. So I used, okay, AKL01, I grabbed the password, I connected with a VPN client, go, okay, what network am I in? It doesn't look like a corporate network. I scan around, I see security cameras, I see point of sale tills, thinking, am I in the network of a store? 10 minutes later, I discovered that their security cameras were using a default password. They had remote desktop servers with no authentication on all their point of sale machines. Kicking back there, eating my lunch. One monitor, I've got security camera feed from inside the store. Other monitor, I'm watching the desktop screen of their till, and I watch all the antivirus alerts I'm accidentally popping up, and I watch the confused employees going and dismissing the antivirus alerts because there's some customer who's really impatient and she wanted to buy from Mars Bar and a copy of Women's Weekly, I think. So, and then at the end of the week, thought it would probably be prudent to call it the customer because I'd imagine they might have 1 or 2 alerts from what I was doing, which luckily they did, so it wouldn't go unnoticed. But call it the customer, write a report, and then sit in meetings with them and work through them what they're doing wrong, and work through how they can get better from here. And this is also where it's sort of the other side of my job, because part of it is almost fitting that stereotype of some nerd sitting in his parents' basement, hoodie up, no lights, just Mountain Dew, Doritos, hack, 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 hack. But the other part is we do actually need to be a friendly face to our customers. It is all well and cool if you're the most pro-cool hacker on the planet, if you can't then sit down with the customer and explain to them how to actually fix stuff. So yeah, end of that week, got the draft report done, submitted it to our peer review team, had to sit down with the customer, and yeah, that's more or less what my average week looks like. So frankly, I think that's a pretty cool job. That's why I love this job. And there's some more sort of other, I guess, traditional perks to it. So you can get paid to hack stuff. So frankly, the fact I was getting paid during that week at all just felt quite amazing. The other amazing thing is we have an awesome community, both within all the security companies in New Zealand, but also within the New Zealand community as a whole. Everyone I work with is talented in their own way, an expert at their own things, and incredibly humble. And also, flexible working is great. But look, we don't do a lot of collaborative working, so I can work from home most of the time, and I do work from home most of the time. My boss is pretty much cool with me working from home wherever. We do have jobs where we go into customer sites. Some of us like to do that, some of us don't, and we sort of get to do what we want. Something new every week. One of the reasons I didn't go down the path of software or web development was I didn't like the idea of projects where you're spending 6 months, a year, 2 years, or indefinite working on this one piece of software, meeting deadlines, needing to do overtime to hit your deadlines, getting burnt out in the same tasks. That's just not, that's how I would experience that role, and that just really isn't compatible with how I like to work. So obviously it can be rewarding to work on these longer term projects, but for me, I find it's a lot more rewarding to sort of keep myself stimulated by doing something new all the time. So the most difficult part of my job in a way is being an expert at everything. So you have to, you get on your kickoff call with your customer, and it was a bit daunting at first because often the people you sit down with are COOs or IT managers, head of whatever. I remember when I was 19 joining my first kickoff meeting, I was the only one from my company there, and I was speaking to, it was a very large New Zealand company. I'm speaking to the CEO about what I'm going to be doing this week, putting on a brave face. Oh yes, I'm an expert, I know exactly what I'm doing, plenty of experience, I promise. But what we need to be doing though is still putting a confident and trustworthy face in front of our customers, and that really gives you an opportunity to learn stuff. You know, I sit down with a customer and they go, oh yes, we built our web application using Django. I'm like, oh yes, I'm very familiar with that. On my other screen, Googling Django security best practices. I'm like, oh yeah, so you've configured that right. You've gone through those steps. I'm like, oh, you seem really knowledgeable in this. I'm like, yep, totally. I'm an expert. And that's something you need to be good at, but also what I really like about my job. It's also great job security. Their unemployment rates in cybersecurity is close to 0%. You will never be out of a job if you're half decent at what you do. And even if this is, you might not want to do this as a job, there's ways you can do it as a hobby. Or if you're working as a software developer, you could still make security, one big thing that you're good at, or become the go-to person in the team for security. So I would encourage you, even if you don't want to follow this as a career, think about how you could incorporate it into the careers that you do go with. In terms of how to get the knowledge though, because I get asked this a lot, and there are 1,000,001 ways to get into the industry. A lot of the people we work with, some of them come from network engineering backgrounds and they just landed in security. Some of them were sysadmins, some of them were developers, cryptographers. We have a really diverse bunch of backgrounds and there's really no set way at all for getting into the industry. But what you do need to know, you need good fundamental knowledge of networking, of Windows, Linux, of at least be strong in at least 1 or 2 programming languages. Also really important to be good at technical writing. That can be a boring part to some. I personally enjoy it. For a lot of people, the report writing is the boring part of the job, but I still get a kick out of it. In terms of how you then learn these skills, it's really important, as I said, to be able to Google stuff and learn on your own because you need to do that every day in the job. So that is also a good way of getting into the industry. If you don't know something, you come across it, Google it, learn it yourself. There are certifications out there you can do for security, and they have some value, and they will give you a good sense of the fundamentals, but you don't need it. I didn't. I work with people who do have certifications, and that was a great learning path for them. Personally, it's something that I wasn't so fussed with. University is also great for learning a bunch of the fundamentals, but no matter what, you can have the best certifications in the world, you can have whatever degree, but security is still a really niche skill set. So what I would encourage you to do, go to conferences. Quite soon there is the OWASP New Zealand Day Conference. It's free for students. I think it's going to be hosted at AUT. It's in a few months' time. Other things is practical hands-on stuff. There's some great sites out there. One of them is called Hack the Box. One of them is called Try Hack Me. And these are websites where the creators they've made machines that are vulnerable purposefully in a sort of real-world scenario. You can connect into this network, this lab network, and you can try and hack these machines. And they'll give you guided tutorials through it, but they'll also give you, ones where it's a challenge you have to figure out yourself. So when it comes to actually, if you're going to a job interview, if you said to me, yes, we have, blah, 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 I've studied XYZ at university, did these security papers, that's all great. But if somebody comes and says, yeah, I might not have studied the right things or studied at all, but I've gone to these conferences, I love watching this, I've spoken to these people, I've done these things, here's something that I've learned that I think is really cool, then that is going to get you a lot further than the next person. So yeah, that is one of a very broad description, but still quite narrow as to how you can actually get into these sort of roles and get these learning paths. So, any questions? Yes?
Has Aura ever been hacked?
No. Yeah. It's obviously, as you can imagine, that would be very embarrassing and probably end us as a company. We have some of the most nerdy security stuff. Our server room in Wellington is built to CIA standards. It's built to standards called SCIFs, Sensitive Compartmentalized Information Facility. So everything from our physical security to our network security. Most of our servers can't speak to the internet full stop, but we still have very rigorous patching routines. Everyone's obviously really well trained. So yeah, we try and do everything right and practice what we preach, and that's worked out pretty well for us, luckily. So yeah, obviously anyone can get hacked, so always staying vigilant. Any other questions? Yep.
So during your work, you were focusing technical things, or going maybe to the company because they're maybe security and ask them, oh, could you print this thing for me, then hack them by something like that?
So it's not so much every day, but still every couple of months we will do these sort of more real world sort of red team like assessments where we might be breaking into buildings and we might be physically breaking into their server room, plugging in an implant, trying not to get caught, and taking photos, picking locks, getting proof of everything, getting proof of what we've done, and then from there trying to escalate to network access. So for some very large New Zealand companies, not a lot of New Zealand companies are at the maturity level where those sorts of really sort of nitty-gritty, big-scale attacks are valuable for them to pay for. But for a few of them, yes, we do break into their buildings, drop network implants. We leave USB keys sort of inside their building that when an employee plugs in, it will actually turn into a keyboard and execute commands in their system. We get to do that stuff as well, but it's not quite as common.
And so like I had the when when they say like smart TV, smart lights, I know it's easy to hack in. Do they like advise you to the company or don't need that something?
Yeah, sort of as I like to say, the S in IoT stands for security. There is no S in IoT, so yeah, IoT devices like smart TVs, light bulbs, cameras, they are some of the most neglected devices. So it's not necessarily don't use them, treat them with caution, just like anything else. Keep it updated, keep it monitored. If possible, put it on separate network segments so that if your coffee machine can speak to your file server in your network, you've designed your network wrong. You should have proper segmentation, separation, etc. within your network. So it's always good to minimize the amount of internet connect things you have, but it's the same rules as always. Keep it up to date, keep it away from sensitive stuff in terms of network segmentation, and cross your fingers. Any more questions? Cool, awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me.
On to our last speaker, who is Tristan from EY.
Hey everyone, I have been made aware that the food's waiting outside, and to sum up what I'm going to talk about, I'm basically an amalgamation of the last two presenters. So I'll quickly run through the points that I've got to cover with you guys today, and then I'm more than happy to take any questions afterwards outside. So a bit about myself, I studied accounting, finance, and data science here. So for those not familiar, a data science degree is just half comp sci, half stats. And you don't do a whole lot on either, so it's about 3 stage 3 quarters. So I wouldn't consider myself a true coder or a true developer, but I do have exposure to that side of things. So I work for a company called EY, and much like our previous speaker who's going in there, is also a consultancy. So we work for a broad range of customers, and we do a lot of different types of work for them. And we break that work up into service lines and sub-service lines. So our service lines are high-level groupings of work that we do, and you might be familiar with some of these terms: consulting, assurance and advisory, and tax. Those are the predominant service lines that we offer work across. And within those service lines, we have what's called sub-service lines. So this is kind of domain expertise that's been grouped under those service lines. So I'm going to be talking to you guys today about the consulting service line. That's what I do at EY. And within consulting, we have actually quite a few areas. I've just got a couple of them listed up here. But we've got data analytics, so that's things like data engineering, data science, and data analytics. We've got cybersecurity, and I'm more than happy to talk to some other aspects of cybersecurity. So you've heard some very technical demonstrations of cybersecurity, and I've worked across the cybersecurity team in an implementation and risk context. So if you think cybersecurity sounds interesting and maybe you want a second opinion, or you still think that work was too advanced, too techy, come over and chat to me and I'll give you the flip side of the risk work, or the flip side of the cybersecurity work that he was talking about. But I will second his point, cybersecurity is a really cool place to be. You definitely want to be without a job. And salaries are also pretty good as well, so that wasn't enough convincing that I don't think I can do much more. We also do a whole bunch of other things, supply chain, management consulting, so very strategic objectives that are generally viewed through a business lens rather than a technology lens. And last but not least, we do hire from multiple faculties, and we do have a bias towards STEM students as well. So don't feel like we've got a business background and can't apply for a position at EY. I'll talk a bit about my role, and as I mentioned, I've worked across a number of places at EY. I've worked across their cybersecurity team, the supply chain and operations, as well as the health consulting team. I'll talk a bit more about my current role, and to be honest, it's going to be covering a lot of what Catherine's covered here. It's a data analytics role, but with a health lens that we view things through. So we consult the health sector, that's market entry strategies for health, governments overseas, that is how do we improve the health outcomes of New Zealanders, etc., etc. So both strategic and less strategic, more operational pieces focus on health domain. I'm currently in the health analytics team, so I'm doing analytics work / data science work for a health client, and the general day-to-day is Excel, PowerPoint, Teams, and R, and probably in that order as well. So in Excel, basically creating the plots, the graphs, the insights that we're presenting to the clients. In PowerPoint, obviously presenting what we found for the client, talk about as well. And then Teams, communication is really important. In consulting, we are communicating with the client to ensure that we're doing what they want us to do, and to ensure that we are appropriately explaining our logic, explaining our findings, and basically helping that business improve. I also do a bit of work in R, and this is the more, techie side of things. Basically, when Excel doesn't cut the mustard anymore, you move to R. If you're looking at large data sets, if you want really bespoke insights, so maybe breaking down time series, for example, you look to more specialized software for that sort of work. So I chose this role for a number of reasons, and potentially some of these will resonate with you. And if you'd like any more depth or any more explanation on any of these points, feel free, as I mentioned, to come to the chat to the side. But I think the major draw card for me in consulting was breadth over depth. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do outside of uni, so I thought, let's cover all my bases, let's do a bunch of things, and let's kind of pick and choose the aspects of those engagements that I really like. And as I mentioned, work across cybersecurity, health, and supply chain and operations, so I've definitely got a bit of visibility across the business, and I've kind of decided that I'm more into that data analytics and data science stuff, so that's kind of where I focus on now. I've also had a bit of imposter syndrome in software development, and I feel like this is an issue that a lot of you guys can resonate with as well. But I think especially for me, coming from a not true coding background, I didn't study software engineering, and I didn't do a full comp sci degree, so I didn't necessarily feel like I was competent enough to be able to take a job at Google or whatever else the true software development people go for this. So I kind of wanted something that would give me exposure to those coding skills that I had, but wouldn't test me too hard, and would allow me to focus in other areas as well. So things like client interaction, things like creating a narrative and being able to reflect your findings to the client. I also found that stuff was really important to me as well. I didn't want to be down in the weeds, so I didn't want to spend 8 hours a day in front of Visual Studio writing out code. So I decided that I'd do something that, again, would touch on those skills, but wouldn't be the primary focus of the project. Cool, so that's the end of this presentation. Again, happy to take questions outside, but any burning questions for now? Cool. Alrighty, let's go get some dumplings, I think.
Awesome, guys. Thank you for this tonight. So I'm sure we're pretty hungry.